Hello, Broncos fans. I woke up to some hot news today, and man, we need to talk about this. I know the NFL offseason has a knack for turning even the smallest conversation into a headline. One day, everyone is talking about training camp. The next, a totally unexpected trade idea pops up, and before you know it, the Broncos fan base is debating the topic. By the end of this, I want to know your opinion. Does it make sense or not? Sound good? Yes, my friends. Some names have suddenly been linked to the Broncos, and a lot of fans have strong, conflicting opinions about it. One potential move has raised far more questions than answers. I'm going to break it all down with you, separating the hype from reality and weighing what could actually help the team versus what might just create unnecessary distractions. Before we move on, make sure you've hit that like button. But wait, only do it if your heart truly bleeds orange and blue. And if you can, let me know how many years you've been a Broncos fan. There are people here who go way back. Nothing but respect for you all. Either way, drop a "Go Broncos" in the comments too. This year, the Super Bowl will be ours. Now, let's talk about the topic that seems to be on everyone's lips. Every offseason, the names of quarterbacks pop up, often linked to teams that don't necessarily need them. This year, two names have sparked plenty of debate among Broncos fans: Spencer Rattler and J.J. McCarthy. Both have their supporters and detractors, and neither seems to elicit a simple reaction. That's exactly what makes the discussion so interesting. Let's start with Spencer Rattler, as his name continues to divide opinion. Some fans believe he still possesses enough raw talent to become a quality backup, provided he lands in the right system. The argument is straightforward. If Denver decided to move on from Jarrett Stidham, Rattler could be a low-cost gamble with physical traits worth developing. Some even believe his playing style might fit Sean Payton's offense better than expected, especially if the acquisition cost were extremely low. But that view is far from unanimous. A large portion of the Broncos fan base remains unconvinced. Many fans feel Rattler hasn't shown enough consistency to justify spending draft picks on him, even if it's just a late-round selection. Others believe the main issue isn't his arm talent, but rather whether he can process the game quickly enough to efficiently run an NFL offense. In Sean Payton's system, quick decision-making is just as important as arm strength, and that is where some fans still have reservations. Another interesting point that continues to come up involves Sam Ehlinger. Several fans believe that if Denver ever moved Stidham, Ehlinger deserves the first opportunity to compete for the backup role before the organization starts looking outside the building. After all, every coaching staff values players who already understand the offense, and continuity has value that often gets overlooked by fans during the offseason. Then there's Jarrett Stidham himself. His future continues to be part of the conversation because many supporters believe Denver could eventually move him if another team needed an experienced backup. Nobody is talking about receiving premium draft picks. Most realistic opinions suggest that if the Broncos ever considered making a deal, it would likely involve a late-round selection. The bigger reason isn't necessarily the compensation itself, but the opportunity to create additional salary cap flexibility while giving younger quarterbacks a chance to compete for a larger role. Of course, that's only one side of the debate. The other side argues that backup quarterbacks rarely receive enough credit until they're suddenly forced into action. Every NFL team hopes its backup never has to play meaningful snaps, but if that moment arrives, coaches need someone they trust immediately. Experience matters. Preparation matters. Knowing the system matters. Those qualities don't always show up on highlight reels, but they become extremely valuable when injuries happen. Now, let's move to the name that probably generated the strongest reactions among Broncos fans: J.J. McCarthy. It's difficult to find another rumored idea that created such an immediate response from the fan base. Across social media, many supporters were quick to reject the possibility altogether. Some described it as a move that would only create unnecessary distractions, while others simply couldn't understand why Denver would consider bringing in another young quarterback when the organization already appears committed to building around Bo Nix. The common argument from those fans is easy to understand. If the Broncos believe Bo Nix is their franchise quarterback, then every decision should revolve around helping him succeed. Bringing in another recent first-round quarterback, even as a backup, could easily become the biggest talking point every time the offense struggles. Instead of discussing game plans or player development, the media conversation could constantly shift toward quarterback speculation. That's something many fans would rather avoid entirely. At the same time, not everyone agrees. There are still people who believe McCarthy deserves more patience. They point out that young quarterbacks often need time before reaching their potential. Development isn't always linear in the NFL. Some players struggle early before eventually becoming quality starters years later. Supporters of that viewpoint believe it would be unfair to completely judge a young quarterback before he's had enough opportunities to grow. Even among those willing to defend McCarthy's long-term potential, however, there doesn't seem to be overwhelming support for bringing him to Denver. Most believe that if he ever succeeds, it will probably happen somewhere he's given the opportunity to develop without becoming the center of another quarterback debate. That seems to be where many Broncos fans agree. This team finally appears to have stability at the most important position in football. Instead of restarting the conversation every offseason, the focus should stay on surrounding Bo Nix with the strongest possible roster. Building around your young quarterback is usually far more productive than creating new questions behind him. And that's exactly where another name enters the discussion. Unlike the quarterback rumors, the possibility of adding linebacker Jordan Brooks has actually generated a very different reaction from many Broncos supporters. Instead of asking whether Denver needs another quarterback, fans started asking whether adding an impact linebacker could make an already solid defense even better. That's a much different conversation. Brooks has developed a reputation as one of the league's most productive linebackers, capable of making plays against both the run and the pass. His ability to diagnose plays, finish tackles, and stay active throughout an entire game makes him the kind of player every defense values. Naturally, adding a player with that kind of production wouldn't come cheap. That's where opinions begin to split again. Some fans believe Denver should aggressively pursue elite defensive talent whenever the opportunity presents itself. If acquiring Brooks requires meaningful draft capital, they argue that proven production is sometimes worth more than an unknown rookie. Others take a more cautious approach. They believe the Broncos already have players they're developing at linebacker, and sacrificing valuable draft picks could hurt future roster building. They also point out that extensions for current players and future financial commitments have to remain part of every decision the front office makes. Both viewpoints have merit. The reality is that successful organizations constantly balance today's roster against tomorrow's flexibility. That's why trades aren't simply about whether a player is talented enough. They're also about cost, timing, salary cap implications, and long-term planning. As training camp gets closer, one thing is becoming increasingly